Usually when someone commits a horrific crime like mass murder, they're caught almost immediately. But in some cases, the killer manages to disappear, sometimes for years, sometimes forever. This is mass killers who still haven't been caught. Hello, friend, and welcome to High Time Crime. My name's Joel, and on here I specialize in true crime and also parasailing. But anyway, today we're going over 3 mass killers who haven't been caught. Number 1, the Las Cruces bowling alley massacre. In 1990, the Las Cruces Bowl was a popular spot in Las Cruces, New Mexico. About 62,000 people lived there at the time, and the place was only about 45 miles north of El Paso, Texas. This bowling alley had 32 lanes, a billiards area, a lounge with a huge TV, a snack bar, and a daycare facility for the employees' children and bowlers' children as well. The Las Cruces Bowl had bowling leagues, community events, weekend tournaments, and league activities, not including the people who just went there for casual bowling. All of that generated quite the cash flow, and we'll talk about that in a moment. But this bowling alley was owned by a man named Ronald Senick. His daughter, Stephanie, was 34 years old, and she typically would manage the daily operations at the business. She was at work every day early and was known to be very dedicated. But like I said, this bowling alley generated a lot of money, and there would be some people that somehow picked up on that. On Saturday, February 10th of 1990, the Las Cruces Bowl was set to open at 9 a.m., like they typically would. Employees normally would get to work about an hour and a half before. So at about 7:30 to 8 a.m., Stephanie Senick, the manager, was at the bowling alley in her office tallying receipts from the previous night. With her was her daughter, Melissa Repass, who was only 12 years old, but she was going to help with the daycare preparations. Also with Stephanie, but mostly Melissa, was Melissa's friend Amy Hauser, who was 13 years old and was there to help Melissa with daycare tasks. Another woman named Ida Algeen, who was 33 years old, was there as well. She was the bowling alley's cook, and at the time, she was preparing food for the snack bar. She wasn't supposed to be there, but a new schedule at work changed that. At 8:20 a.m., 2 unidentified Hispanic men entered the bowling alley through the unlocked front door. It's likely both of them were armed with .22 caliber pistols. Upon entering though, one of the gunmen went to the kitchen where Ida was preparing food for the snack bar. The gunman pointed a pistol at her and ordered her to move to the manager's office, which was down the hall from the kitchen. The other gunman had went directly to the manager's office where Stephanie, her daughter Melissa, and Melissa's friend Amy were all at. It's very clear that these 2 gunmen knew the layout of the bowling alley given their concise plan. About 2 minutes later, at 8:22 a.m., another bowling alley employee, a mechanic there named Stephen Duran, who was 26 years old, arrived to work. He brought with him his 6-year-old stepdaughter, Paula Algeen, who I believe had no relation to Ida, and his biological daughter, Valerie Duran, who was only 2. I believe Stephen brought them there so that way they could be watched at the daycare. Stephen would then walk into the main office, unaware of what was happening, and essentially walked into a trap. By this point, both of the gunmen and everyone else were now inside of the manager's office. The 2 gunmen took everyone hostage and forced Stephanie to open the safe, and she did. The men took anywhere from $4,000 to $5,000 in cash and personal checks from the night before. Right after these men obtained the money, they shot all 7 people multiple times, mostly in the head using a .22 caliber pistol. 24 shots in total were fired. Stephen Duran, Paula Algeen, and Amy Hauser would all die at the scene, while Valerie Turan died at the hospital. Stephanie, Melissa, and Ida were all critically injured, and after the gunman shot everyone, they poured flammable liquid on the desk in the office and set it on fire to destroy any evidence. Afterwards, these two men fled the scene, and according to eyewitness reports, they left in a green four-wheel drive vehicle. Meanwhile, still inside at about 8:27 a.m., Melissa Repass, the 12-year-old daughter of Stephanie, despite being shot 5 times, including in the head, was able to crawl to a phone in the office and call 911. Due to the graphic nature of that call, I'm not going to play it. 6 minutes would pass, and at 8:33 a.m., first responders and firefighters arrived and found an absolutely gruesome scene. After taking Valerie to the hospital, she would unfortunately pass away. Meanwhile, Stephanie, Melissa, and Ida all made it. Melissa and Ida were able to provide descriptions of the suspects. One was a Hispanic male about 29 to 30 years old and 5'10", 170 pounds with light eyes. The other one was an older Hispanic male about 45 to 50 and 5'7", around 140 pounds with a slight accent. These are what police believed they looked like. Police then set up nearly 10 roadblocks to screen vehicles around the area. A guy named Steve Senek, who was Stephanie's brother, was also at the bowling alley early in the morning, but left and said that he saw 2 Hispanic men near the entrance only minutes before and saw one of them handing a briefcase to the other. The police collected 24 .22 caliber shell casings, unmatched fingerprints, footprints, and some traces of flammable liquid, but unfortunately due to limitations, they were unable to collect any DNA. Their department at the time just wasn't equipped to deal with something like this. Investigators also looked at Ronald Senek, Stephanie's father, and the owner of the bowling alley, but he was in Arizona at the time of the massacre. They also stated that he was uncooperative during his interviews and provided very limited and vague responses about what could have happened and why. Apparently, the Las Cruces Police Department had their suspicions about him. Some people believe that it could have been regulars of the bowling alley, or that someone was tipped off because of how these men acted and executed their plan. They went right to the safe, knew there was going to be a decent amount of money, and with zero hesitation committed an absolutely atrocious crime. Valerie Rose Turan was Stephen Turan's biological daughter and only 2 years old. She was a sweet little girl. Paula Eigen was 6 years old and Stephen's stepdaughter. She was also a kind little girl. Amy Eileen Hauser was 13 years old and was great friends with Melissa, and she was very involved in community activities. Stephen Turan was 26 years old and an employee at the Las Cruces Bowl. He was a devoted family man with a playful personality. He loved Van Halen and owned a vinyl record collection. Stephen had one child, Valerie, and a stepchild, Paula. Stephanie Senek was 43 years old when she died in 1999 due to complications of her injuries from 1990. She was the manager of the Las Cruces Bowl and a hardworking mother to Melissa. After 6 days, around February 16th of 1990, the Las Cruces Bowl would reopen to the public, and this rapid reopening under Ronald Senek, Stephanie's father, was looked at as suspicious by some investigators, but once again, he was found to be innocent. 6 days isn't even a week. Their funerals wouldn't even have happened yet. But on June 30th of 2018, the Las Cruces Bowl would officially close. In February of 2020, a news conference happened about this case, and the reward was increased to $30,000 for any information about who was responsible. A tip came in to an ABC7 news anchor from a woman in Las Cruces who named a man that she claimed to be the younger suspect. She said that he told her and his family that he was responsible and that he apparently died in 1997. A Las Cruces detective, who's now the main one on this case, sent forensic evidence for lab evaluation because of this tip, but as of now, nothing's been confirmed. After 35 years, these poor people have still not had their justice, and hopefully one day they're able to. Number 2, the yogurt shop murders. In 1991, in Austin, Texas, there was a small little spot in a strip mall called I Can't Believe It's Yogurt. This was a small, family-friendly frozen yogurt shop, a part of a larger franchise. Inside, there was a dining area with booths and tables. There was a counter with frozen yogurt dispensers, a kitchen and storage area in the back, and a rear door that led to an alley. Around this time, there were about 500,000 people living in Austin, Texas. On December 6th of 1991, something terrible was going to take place. I Can't Believe It's Yogurt opened for business, and nothing specific was documented. Things for a majority of the day were normal. 2 girls were scheduled to work the night shifts at the shop, and their names were Jennifer Harbison, who was 17 years old, and Eliza Thomas, who was also 17 years old. Jennifer had been working there since June 26th as a counter helper, while Eliza was a shift leader and worked there for about a year. I don't know the exact time that they had went into work, but we can assume it was anywhere from 12 to 5 p.m. Jennifer had a younger sister named Sarah, who was 15 at the time, and she was hanging out with her 13-year-old friend, Amy Ayers. They were at North Cross Mall, which is only about 10 minutes away from the yogurt shop, and they planned to get a ride home with Jennifer. From 6 to 9 p.m., everything at the yogurt shop was normal, and Jennifer and Eliza were helping customers, serving orders, and restocking supplies when needed. The shop was set to close at 11 p.m., and so around 10 p.m., these 2 girls started to wipe tables down, restock napkin dispensers, and flip some chairs at the tables that weren't occupied. Around this time is when eyewitnesses or customers had seen a man who was described as hustling people, asking to use the back bathroom. The man supposedly took a long time back there, and what investigators believe may have happened is that he also jammed the rear door open. By about 10:30 p.m., the shop was only a half an hour away from closing, and the 2 girls continued to close down shop. At this point, there was still a decent amount of customers inside, and witnesses reported seeing 2 men at a booth slouched and whispering, not eating yogurt. The booth had an empty napkin dispenser, and their chairs weren't flipped up, so investigators believed they were there for a while. 15 minutes would go by, and at 10:45 p.m., Jennifer's sister, Sarah, and her friend Amy arrived at the yogurt shop from the mall. These 2 girls were waiting for Jennifer and Eliza to finish up cleaning. So there were 4 total people inside of the shop, besides all of the girls, and 2 of those people were the guys in the booth and a couple. At 10:50 p.m., this couple left the yogurt shop, and what would happen afterwards was sick. Jennifer went to the front door to lock it to prevent any new customers, as this is what they were taught to do. Either these 2 men left the building, or possibly it was them who did what I'm about to talk about. It was most likely them. So I believe Jennifer and Eliza were still mid-cleaning when all of a sudden these guys decided to take the girls hostage. They made them open the register, and anywhere from $500 to $1,000 was stolen. After this, the men forced the girls into the back storage room, where they stripped them and bound them with their own clothes. They assaulted one of the girls and then killed all 4 of them execution style. The men then stacked the bodies, poured flammable liquid on them, and started a fire to destroy any evidence. They then left through the back door into the alleyway and escaped. At 11:47 p.m., an Austin police officer was on patrol and he noticed smoke coming from the yogurt shop. He reported that to dispatch. At 11:50 p.m., firefighters and police would arrive, and what they found was absolutely sickening. The place was on fire, and there were 4 girls deceased in the back whose bodies were charred. Immediately, an investigation began, and the police collected 24 bullet casings, both 22 and 38 caliber. They obtained partial fingerprints and a partial male DNA profile. The police found out that the front door was locked and that the back door was unlocked. They also interviewed 52 different customers who were there from 4:30 to 11 p.m. One witness named James Croft described a man who was white, about 6 foot tall, mid-20s with a medium build. He had dark hair, he was clean shaven, with a clear, deep voice and pointed nose. When shown suspects in a lineup, James identified no one. Two of those men that were initially suspected by police were named Michael Scott and Robert Springsteen. These guys were both 17 in the year 1991, and when new detectives took over the case in 1998 or 1999, they apparently coerced these men into confessing to this crime. Michael and Robert were both convicted in 2001 of the murders, and their convictions were overturned in 2006 and 2007 after DNA mismatch and coercion. A few jurors actually believe that Michael and Robert are still guilty because apparently Scott knew things that no one else would know, such as all of the girls were shot once in the back of the head, except Amy, and that Amy was shot twice because the first shot wasn't fatal. He also knew the shop had an in-ground safe, and apparently both of the men's confessions were exactly the same. That they both even confessed to vomiting over a bridge right after committing the crime. Both Michael and Robert's charges were dropped, and as of right now, they're considered to be innocent. Two other guys were named Maurice Pierce, and he was 16 in 1991, and Forrest Wellborn, who was 15 in 1991. These two were acquaintances of both Michael and Robert. In fact, the day after the murders, all four of these guys went on a trip to San Antonio in a stolen Nissan Pathfinder. They clearly were on a bad path already. Maurice was arrested on December 14th of 1991 at North Cross Mall with a .22 caliber revolver and 16 rounds of ammunition in his pocket. Forrest was with him at the time, but he didn't get arrested. Maurice was then interrogated by Detective Hector Polanco, and Maurice claimed the pistol was the murder weapon and that Forrest borrowed it to commit the killings. He also admitted to stealing an SUV and fleeing to San Antonio the day after because they were guilty. Police then wired Maurice and got him to hang out with Forrest to try to get Forrest to confess to the crime, but the police said that Forrest never did and seemed clueless about the whole thing. That it was obvious to everyone that Maurice was just trying to force this issue onto Forrest. Both Maurice and Forrest would pass polygraph tests, and ballistics on Maurice's gun were inconclusive due to the ammunition being damaged at the scene. In 1991, the police dismissed both Maurice and Forrest, and they suspected that Maurice was fabricating things for attention and that he had a mental health problem. In 1999, Detective Paul Johnson revisited Maurice's claims that he made in 1991, and this actually led to the arrest of all four men on October 6th of 1999 for capital murder. Michael and Robert confessed, while Forrest was questioned in 2000 at his lawyer's office for hours, and he provided nothing incriminating. All charges were dropped against him in July of 2000. Maurice was indicted, but he got released in January of 2003 after prosecutors admitted that they lacked evidence besides both Michael and Robert's confessions. Also, in 2009, DNA evidence came out and showed that it belonged to none of the men. On December 23rd of 2010, Maurice Pierce was killed by an Austin police officer, Frank Wilson, after a traffic stop where Maurice went crazy and stabbed Officer Frank in the neck, which resulted in him being shot. There were four girls that were taken that night for zero reason at all. They were Amy Ayers, who was 13 years old and a student at Burnett Middle School, where she was a part of the Laniers FFA, or the Future Farmers of America. This is where she met Sarah Harbison, but Amy was the youngest victim and described as cheerful and an animal-loving girl. Sarah Harbison was 15 years old and a freshman at Lanier High School. She really loved animals and was described as being a vibrant girl who was full of energy. Her sister Jennifer was a senior at Lanier High School, and she worked at the yogurt shop. She was described as being responsible, kind, and hardworking. Jennifer was also a part of the FFA and loved animals, country music, and her future appeared bright. Eliza Thomas was 17 years old and a senior at McAllen High School. She was known for her warm personality and how involved she was in the community. Like the rest of the girls, Eliza was also a part of the FFA, and she loved animals and country music. She was a promising teen with a bright future. Rest in peace to all 4 of these young girls, and it's just terrible what happened to them. Hopefully one day this case can be solved, and whoever is responsible for this heinous crime can be given the harshest punishment. Or perhaps they were already found. Apparently, in 2017, the Austin Police Department found a YSTR match in a public DNA database, but the FBI refused to release the person's identity, citing certain laws. The profile's commonality had 16 markers, and there were thousands of potential matches. This case, though, was an absolute tragedy. Number 3, the Lane Bryant Massacre. Lane Bryant is a retail chain that specializes in plus-size women's clothing that was founded long ago in the year 1904. They have accessories, apparel, and lingerie. By the year 2008, this popular brand was all across the United States, and typically they were located in malls or strip malls like the one in Brookside Marketplace in Tinley Park, Illinois. Now on Saturday, February 2nd of 2008, something terrible would occur. The day was cold, around mid-20 degrees and a bit below freezing. Lane Bryant had a clearance sale this day, and they were expecting it to be a bit busy. Rhoda McFarland was the manager, and she arrived to the store a bit before 9 a.m. Rhoda wasn't scheduled this day to work, but she decided to come in anyway to help a part-time employee that was. The part-time employee isn't named due to confidentiality, and this case still being cold, but we do know that she was 33 years old at the time and a nursing student who worked weekends at Lane Bryant. Well, Rhoda, at around 9 a.m., received a phone call that lasted about 20 minutes, and it came from a former member of the Embassy Christian Center in Crest Hill, Illinois. I'll tell you more about it in a bit, but basically Rhoda was a youth pastor there until 2006 when a big scandal happened. Who exactly she talked to and what they talked about was never released. About 30 minutes later, at 9:30 a.m., is when the part-time employee arrived to the store, and then both her and Rhoda began to prepare the store for their 10 a.m. opening. When 10 a.m. rolled around, within minutes a few women had entered the store. First, you had Sarah Safransky, who was 22 years old, and she was most likely shopping for professional clothing for her job. Next, you had Carrie Chuso-Hudek, who was 33, and she was going to get some clothes for a get-together with her college friends. Then there was Jennifer Bishop, who was actually in Tinley Park, accompanying her husband, who was attending a business conference. Jennifer stopped into Lane Bryant to most likely just pass the time while she waited for her partner. The last customer inside of the store was named Connie Woolfolk, and she was 37 years old. Connie was looking for an outfit for a friend's birthday party later that night. So while these women were shopping and Rhoda and the employee were working, a man walked inside of the store. This guy pretended to be a delivery driver in some sort of way, and at first, he appeared to be. But then all of a sudden, this guy pulled out a .40 caliber handgun and yelled out that he's robbing the place. This man then forced all 6 women into a back room, and he bound them with duct tape, and he made them all lie face down, and he put underwear on all of their faces. At some point in time, he assaulted at least one of the women, and he had them in the back room for quite some time. At 10:39 to 10:40 a.m., Target cameras across the street captured a dark sedan and an SUV arriving to the Lane Bryant store. Around that time is most likely when Rhoda began to try and loosen her restraints, and she was able to. Rhoda pulled out her cell phone secretively, and she called 911, and I'll play that call for you. It's very hard to hear, but I'll try to decipher some parts.
911 emergency. Lane Bryant. We're at Tinley Park. Hurry. Stay on the line. Stay on the line. Let me get you to Tinley Park. Don't hang up. 911 emergency. Lane Bryant.
After this call, this man must have seen the phone or something, and immediately at 10:45 a.m., he shot all 6 of the women execution style in the head. 5 of those women died instantly, but one of them, the part-time employee, didn't. She was grazed in the neck after shifting her head a little bit, and it was said that she played dead. Immediately after killing these women, the gunman left the Lane Bryant and ran outside, and this is when both the SUV and sedan fled the store. A Tinley Park police officer, who was in the parking lot right by the target, responded within about a minute or two, and this is when he found an absolutely gruesome scene. Immediately, the entire area was locked down, and police began to investigate. They took physical evidence, including a shoe print, some kind of DNA, and .40 caliber shell casings. Unfortunately, Lane Bryant did not have any security cameras inside. The police would also talk to the only survivor, and from her they were able to obtain a pretty detailed description of the suspect. He was an African American man, around 25 to 39 years old at the time, and anywhere from 6 foot to 6'2". This guy had a husky build with broad shoulders, and he weighed anywhere from 200 to 240 pounds. He had a medium dark complexion and cornrowed hairstyle with a receding hairline. On the right side, he had 4 light green beads. This guy was wearing an unremarkable black jacket with black jeans that had an embroidered cursive G on the back pocket. On his head, he was wearing a charcoal gray skull cap that covered most of his hair, except the part that was visible with the braids. This man has a $100,000 reward out for him. Now, as time would pass, Lane Bryant would never reopen at this location after this occurrence. The store would later turn into a TJ Maxx. And as of 2025, it's been 17 years since this tragedy happened, and it still seems to be kept in the dark. I'm not sure if the police have any leads or whatnot, but we can sure hope so. It's pretty obvious that whoever it was had people helping him, considering 2 cars arriving at the same time and leaving right after he left the store. Though that might be a coincidence? Now, there is some weird discrepancies with the employee who was shot in the neck, and I did read that some investigators are still weary of that situation. Given the fact that all of the women were bound with underwear over their heads and tape on their hands, how did she barely get grazed in the neck while all of the other women were shot in the head and killed? It's possible that because of the undergarments being on their heads, that the guy couldn't see that well, and when he shot, he thought it was correct. Another thing is that these men would have killed these women within a minute or so because of Rhoda's 911 call. He had to get out of there fast, and so it's possible he messed up. Or perhaps something else happened, and one day it will be revealed. As of right now, though, there's nothing, and that's absolutely tragic. Rhoda Hamilton McFarland was 42 years old and had a strong work ethic. She loved being involved in her community, and she was just a very kind person with a glowing personality. Rhoda enlisted in the Air Force after high school, and she served as a nurse at Andrews Air Force Base in Maryland for 3 years. After this, she remained in the Air Force Reserves for a while. Rhoda was not married and didn't have any children, but she did have a fiancé. Rhoda was considered to be God-loving, and faith was a huge part of her identity. In the late 1990s or early 2000s, she began to attend Embassy Christian Center, which was a non-denominational Christian church. Rhoda served as both an associate pastor and a youth pastor. She helped mentor teens, lead youth programs, and assisted with church activities. In 2006 or 2007, Rhoda left the church due to disagreements over financial management. The pastor, George Aja Jr., took out a $900,000 second mortgage on the church and then left to go to Texas to open a new church. The community had thought the church was almost paid off, but in reality, the church owed a ton of money. Rhoda was actually a part of previous mortgages of the church as a co-signer, but when this happened, she wasn't even told. After Rhoda left, a lot of things would happen. The police did investigate the church, and I believe they found no wrongdoing, but it is interesting that someone from the church did call Rhoda that morning. Sarah Therese Safransky was 22 years old and a recent college graduate. She was described as being a doll and a sweetheart, and she worked hard at Northern Illinois University to get good grades and graduate. Sarah was starting her first job at CNA Financial, which was a firm in downtown Chicago. Carrie Chuso Hudek was 33 years old and a high school counselor at Homewood Flossmoor High School. She was considered to be a joyful and inspiring woman. Carrie graduated from Loyola University with a master's degree, and she had just recently gotten married and was planning to start a family. Jennifer Bishop was 34 years old and was considered to be a warm, family-oriented woman who also had a knack for bringing people together. Jennifer was an incredibly kind woman who had a very generous spirit. She was married and had 3 young children. Jennifer was also said to be a fantastic nurse, and she gave exceptional care. Connie Woolfolk was a 37-year-old single mother to 2 boys, ages 16 and 10. Her youngest son had spina bifida, which was a condition that required significant medical care, and Connie cared for him with no exception. Connie was considered to be the backbone of her family, a caregiver, and a provider. She was a resilient woman with a vibrant spirit and a fighter who faced challenges head-on. Connie worked the overnight shift at the Target across the street, and she had a strong work ethic. She just recently co-founded a mortgage company with her mother, and she was ambitious to get to a better life and build a better future for her sons. It's tragic that all of these women endured such a horrible fate for zero reason at all. Hopefully, all 3 of these cases we talked about can somehow become solved. These innocent people and their families deserve closure, and the people responsible deserve the harshest of punishments.